Yeah.
And there was water.
Oh, there was water.
That is for everything we've done. That's
Yes.
an entire career. It's that much.
This chair it's not going to work.
No.
Look, we're laid back and it's like an easy
Yeah.
chair. This is not going
It's
to
like a
work.
bus
I'm going
tour
to sit
chair,
here the whole
yeah.
time like this.
Should I also lean back or should I lean forward? What's
Jesus.
I know.
David.
Terrible start. We're already off on the wrong foot.
David really looks like he wants a job, doesn't he?
Have you heard about the newspaper business? You know how
I
things are
have.
going right now. We could, yes. There's a lot about the world that's uncertain and transitory, but one constant that gives me a lot of hope is the fact that you, Jerry Seinfeld, and you, Colin Quinn, are friends, and you have been for many years.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
I like that.
Do you have any sense of where that friendship began, when you would have first met? Do you recall that far?
I remember when we met. Jerry probably does. And he wasn't as big as he became in the 90s, but this is about 1989, and he was at Catch a Rising Star, and he was going on, he starts talking to me, he goes, so what about your apartment? I go, you bought an apartment? He bought an apartment like 1989. And I go, no, I didn't buy my apartment, I rent an apartment. He goes, well, you're such a goy. He goes, it's such a goy move.
I said, you want to be a Jew, you buy, you don't rent. Renting is for suckers.
And you knew right away that there was a kinship there, or was there a sort of a feeling out period where you ever?
Let's not make this into a buddy cop movie.
But what's kept you tight all these years? What do you get out of that?
I do think, I don't know if you would agree with this, I do think Colin and I have a very deep allegiance to New York. And even though I went to LA in 1980 and didn't come back till 98, all that time I had this, commitment to it. It wasn't, most people just kind of go where they got to go for work, but he always had that, and I think that's kind of where we started. Like, we would start, dissing LA all the time,
Right.
and loving New York, and right? Would you say that's kind of one of the building blocks?
Yeah, and comedy too. It's like we both have totally different styles, but it's still the same mentality, like the same belief in like the principles of comedy. Not to suck all the fun out of comedy by saying that, but like just about like when's the joke coming and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like where is it funny? Why is it not being? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Can you safely sort of talk about? I know talking about craft is death, but can you safely talk about craft with each other, or does it start to get into?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do it all the time.
What we love to talk about actually is the brutality of writing, because that is really the essence of comedy. Most comedians, you're kind of you're as funny as you're funny. You don't really get too much funnier than whatever you had when you started. But learning to be a writer is the real delta, if I can go do that kind of language here. I'm sorry. Learning to be a writer is the delta of success and failure in comedy. Wouldn't you agree, Colin?
Yeah. And when I started, Jerry's already doing it, but it was like, Jerry Seinfeld, he writes at least a couple of hours a day. And it was like a big thing that he actually wrote. And then all the going, Chris, Rock, everybody like that, if you don't write, you're never gonna, like he said, you're as funny as you're gonna be, but you have to keep pushing the writing. And it's hard. That's why we discuss. It's like patting each other on the back, like, come on, you gotta go, because they remind you, there's no easy way to do it. There's no shortcut with comedy.
And there's no supervision either. No one knows or cares if you're
Right.
writing, or doing anything. You're so on your own in comedy. It's just, they put you in a room with toys and go make something.
Yeah.
And when you say writing, you're literally, at that. once was a typewriter, now a computer screen. You're not just sort of riffing into a microphone, seeing what comes out, shaping it after.
Well, you do that too, but still, it's like mapping out, well, what do I want to say about this,
Yeah.
And that's what I always do. Everybody in comedy's fantasy is that you can just riff.
Right.
Come up with stuff. The beauty of writing is you realize you have to confront the fact that you're not a genius. That
Right.
it takes dirty work to come up with your stuff,
But, I spend I've had the pleasure of spending time in each of your company, and you're both just very sort of, I mean, you're spontaneous people, and you just, to me, seem effortlessly funny. You can be funny in conversation, but the joke writing, that really is something that takes acuity and.
Well, I don't know. That's spontaneous people. I don't know what that means, but if this was a show right now that these people had paid to see, we're in deep trouble at this point. Okay? So this is how much the spontaneous gets you. This sweating is happening, would be happening right now.
At the 52-minute mark, with 52 minutes to go, we're already at flop sweat.
Deep trouble, yeah.
Yeah.
Part of what we're talking about tonight is New York City history and Colin's special, The New York Story. Let's talk briefly about your credentials.
No, stop. Go ahead.
Let's talk about your credentials as native New Yorkers.
Ever heard of a Q? No, go ahead.
Our credentials as native New Yorkers was the question.
Credentials. New York, Long Island, Brooklyn. I mean, that is New York. Even working the show out, I kept going out to Long Island because Long Island is where all the people that grew up in New York. And if you want to hear a New York accent, Long Island and Florida is the only place people. You know what I mean? It's everybody.
You grew up in Park Slope,
yes,
but not the yoga brunches co-op.
Sorry, folks, we lost some street cred over the years. In the '80s, you said I'd be like, yeah, Park Slope, but anyway, yeah, but not the right. Well, it was very mixed. It wasn't complete, it wasn't East New York, but I mean, nothing. It wasn't the South Bronx, nothing. It wasn't Brownsville. Anyway, but it was it was different. It was much more mixed, and we always talk about that, about the different ethnicity. And Jerry was actually, if you want to hear the original, when I first started doing this, he goes, you should do this. I don't know if you remember, before I even did the first show, he goes, you should do a show about New York, because I'm always going out to Queens, traveling around, doing these different ethnicities, and so he goes, you should do a show about that. He said that even then,
And Jerry, I mean, I know you spent like a minute of your life in Brooklyn, but you really grew up in Long Island, Massapequa.
Yes.
Now, I mean, Long Islanders, they can safely call themselves native New Yorkers, or is there conflict about that? Are you?
I don't really care. I mean,
I don't let my wife get away with it. My wife is a Long Islander. I don't let her call herself a native New Yorker.
What exit?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my parents are from the city, and the city, the city was always that, Oz. It was like that place that they would take you to sometimes, and it was very exciting. And from a childhood, I just always wanted to get back to the city, even though, they had started there. They didn't understand, and Colin, I love to talk about this. In the 60s and 70s, 50s too, the city people lived in the city because they had to. Because it was work.
Right.
Nobody thought it was cool. There was no urban culture of being in the city. It was just, that's where the job was. Let's be close to the job. And so my parents didn't want to live in the city, but it was always, for some reason, always the goal for me to just get to the city.
Would you venture in as a teen and
yeah,
kind of
sure,
explore it?
sure.
Do you have hangouts or destinations, or you just kind of walk around and take it in?
Well, it was really going to Queens College, and we were always cutting class and going to Chinatown, and and just running around the city, and then starting to just chase comedians, where you would hear there's a comedian performing there, and there are these clubs opening up, and the Improv, and Catch a Rising Star, and it was just, that's where there were comedians.
Right. Do either of you have any sense of how far back your ancestries go in New York? Have you ever explored that, or found out sort of when your forebears arrived here?
Yeah, I mean, mine came in the 1920s from Ireland, from Northern Ireland, and the north of Ireland, we call it. And, because we don't like the British, we say Northern Ireland's part of the British colony.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, they came like the 1920s.
Mine about the same, early 1900s. My dad was an incubator baby in Coney Island. He was on display. They had just invented the incubator. He was.
You could literally tell me anything, I'd believe.
No, it's true.
totally susceptible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the New York story, I mean, you talk about, I mean, historically, the arrival of the Irish and the arrival of the Jews here in the city.
Sure.
The Irish, at least, as you portrayed them, I mean, they were the organizers, the laborers. The Jews were the kvetchers, it seems.
No, the Italians were the laborers.
Oh, okay.
We were the civil servants.
Right.
It's a different thing.
Okay.
Let's get that straight.
Right,
Then the
right.
Italians came in their big hands, and we're just like, okay, over there and build that way. And yeah, that's how it was.
Right. Do you see yourself? I mean, do you see some part of your character, in? Do you see your identity reflected in that in some way?
Sure, in like the cynical part of the Irish or the sarcastic, I mean, what people don't understand about Irish people is we look at ourselves as real intellectuals for the most part, and people don't realize we think we're the greatest writers, just the big intellectuals. So, yeah, of course I see that in myself and most Irish people. I think, like everybody else, we all love, we're proud of our writing people, and we're even proud of a guy like Conor McGregor, who's not an intellectual. Everybody's very tribal when it comes down to it.
Right, right. I mean, Jerry, what do you think about? I mean, Colin talks about the Jews arriving and being the kind of it's your line.
He helped me.
Yeah.
What's that?
You talk about them complaining on the boat ride, and then they.
Right, we sat down. And, yeah.
Colin is one of the great Semitophiles that I have ever met. I mean, he really understands deeply the Jewish character and the Jewish mindset.
Yes.
He has kind of adopted it, I think, and really made an Irish-Jewish cocktail out of his whole personality.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. I've studied the Jews a long time, and I know them very well.
Right.
Tell the story. Tell the story about your mother and the lady in the
Oh,
front.
Naomi, her friend
Yeah.
Naomi. My mother is a Jewish friend, and she told me years later, she goes, because our house had like nice like rugs and something that wasn't really like tagging from the Irish side, she goes, Naomi used to tell her friend Naomi is Jewish, and she's like, for just a few dollars more, you can get this rug, and it's like an Afghan rug or something like that, and you can get a lamp. Like, that lamp might be a little loud, and so she basically made our taste, our house look beautiful, because of my mother's Jewish friend,
She steered her.
She steered her gently, gently but firmly, as the Jews do. Gently, but, not taking no for an answer. The word relentless has come up.
Do you see that? Do you see that dynamic replicated in any way in the way that the two of you work together, or is it totally different?
No, but I mean, Jerry is a real direct. Like people always like, oh, how do you direct a one-man show? But it's like directing anything. You can say about anything. He's his editor, writer, and also stage stuff. He knows, like he understands. Like he'll say to me, and he's the only person with the authority, may I say, that I would listen to when he goes, well, I don't get it. What's the joke there? Like normally it'd be like, get the joke, you're not a comedian. But he's like, I don't get it. It's Jerry Seinfeld. You kind of have to take that, and say maybe the joke's not coming out.
Do you feel your heart drop in a moment like that? For Jerry of all people to say, I don't see the joke in that. That's
No, I get mad. I get mad. But I mean,
No, the jokes to us are just bricks, and it's just we're building something, and this brick looks like it's not on there right, and it's just a structure.
So we have a couple of clips from the New York story, so we're going to show them back to back.
Oh, great.
I don't want to make this uncomfortable. Could we not do that legal? I'm kidding, folks.
Okay. You're genuinely okay if we do this? The material.
I'm not even going to answer that.
Okay.
Did Netflix approve it? Hey.
Yes. We have legal permission to do it. So a couple clips from Colin Quinn, the New York story, and then we'll talk more about it.
But you still don't have the psychological, the attitude, the superior attitude that we all had, that came from the British, Because the British showed up, and the British in those days, they showed up, it was theirs. Nobody even fought. They're just like this, the drill, it's the British Empire. And they brought the real Navy. They're the Royal Navy, the biggest Navy in the world. So even Peter Savage is walking around, looks out in the harbor one day with his wooden leg, He just turns to his Dutch friends and speaks in Dutch. We're fucked, you understand me? And the British were like, you can keep the names of the towns, they're quaint, but lose the shoes. They were the British Empire. We can get rid of the windmills, please. And what are you calling it, by the way? Like New Amsterdam, because the Dutch named it after their most prized possession. Amsterdam is beautiful. The British rename it after the sixth shittiest city in Northern England. York was always a shithole, Like, we should have been named New London, right? But New London there already was a New London, Connecticut. But if you've been to New London, Connecticut, you realize they should be called New York and we should be called New London. And that German personality is still there, the abrupt, rude, polite, where people from out of town, they ask directions, they're smiling, you're giving them information. Excuse me, where's the museum? Excuse me, where's the subway? People from New York accuse you of information. Like you owe them the information. Don't say excuse me, just block you. Where'd you get the ice cream? You're like, holy shit. And then if you tell them they want a review, you're like, over there, is it good? And if you say it's good, you have to leave, or they might come back like, where's that guy that said this was good?
I love a lot about that. I love the hoodie. I thought that was a good look.
Well, it was one of those things where I wanted to be comfortable.
Right. When you look at your recent specials, including this one, and you also did one called Unconstitutional, and a previous one, Long Story Short. So I mean, these are not just a series of jokes. I mean, these are like almost comedic essays. I mean, they have a narrative to them. There's an overall point that you're trying to make. I mean, how did you even come to that kind of a format in your comedy?
I did a thing called Irish Wake, and but that was in the 90s. But then one day at breakfast, I don't even know if you remember this, and Jerry goes to me, why don't you start doing some more of those one-man shows? Do a one-man show. He says, do a one-man show, I'll make sure it gets done. You know what I mean? It's like 2010 or 2009. And he goes, do a one-man show. And I go, Jerry, I came to him a couple of months ago, I have the one-man show. And he goes, really? And they came and watched it at the theater downtown.
Right.
And it was choppy, but he goes, I'll direct it, Because Jerry's very OCD. He doesn't like when things are kind of sloppy. So he goes, I'm coming to come in and direct this and shape this. And then he came in and directed that one. Right. So.
Right. I mean, Jerry, I have to imagine, anybody that anybody that has access to you, other comedians that are friendly with you, would love to have, your collaboration, your input on the things that they do. And I'm sure you're very careful and sparing about who you formally collaborate with. So why Colin? Why work with him in that way?
I don't know what they're laughing at. But,
I think of it as it's a mark of distinction. I mean, who else's shows have you
Exactly,
directed?
but it could have been phrased more delicately. They're laughing at your audacity.
I was doing an episode of Comedians Cars with Norm Macdonald the other day, and one of the questions he asked me, he says, if you don't like a guy's act, is there any chance you could like him? And I had to think for a second, and I went, no. And so, but when you do like someone's act, and you, because comedians, as much as, we have lots of friends whose acts, you could take it or leave it. And it has to at least rise to a certain level of, I don't know what that is, but that's part of comedic friendship, is you have to kind of have a respect for their work. Right. And I've always just adored the way he writes, the way he thinks, the way the things he finds. They're wonderful, small, hilarious things. So for me, it's like, it's fun to play with. They're beautiful building blocks or whatever. And he struggles a little bit with the overall structure, and that's the part that I really like. Yeah. So it's just a natural thing, and we're good friends, and it's just fun. And
I mean, have you ever seen anybody that does what he does in the sense of, he's as I said, I mean, these are like essayistic. I mean, these could almost be, you know, I mean, these could be books in their own rights, or they could be
Oh,
chapters.
Dave, no. But he's from the Times. He knows what he's talking about.
They could be op-eds. I mean,
Well,
but he's, you know.
actually, the truth is, that's kind of a little comedic sleight of hand that we do. We want you to feel that way.
Right.
Whether or not we're really doing that, I don't want to say.
Right.
You know, sometimes a lot of comedy sounds like you're driving to a point of logic or perspective, and you're really just setting up a joke.
Right.
It's a technique.
Right.
So, but his ability to create a lot of things like around this idea, which was what did each ethnic group contribute to this idea of a New York personality, and he was able to just drive on that and create all these things around it, and then you have to get them in the right order, in the right shape. And,
Exactly.
And that's part of it. But the answer is his material is the reason I love to work with him. His material is great.
Yeah. What was the experience like? I mean, when you first collaborated on Long Story Short, and then that you took to Broadway, which in and of itself, I mean, that is a whole other hurdle and adds, I'm sure, more complications. I mean, just learning to work together, you know, in an environment like that and for a project like that.
You know, I mean, it's not easy to find someone who you can say to, that's not funny, and they're not going to get upset.
Yeah.
You know, really hard to do that. Most comedians are very defensive, very protective of their stuff, and even if you may be a person of accomplishment, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear from anybody. So, so there's a. Very good. So that, you know, so you have to have the relationship trust, and you have to have an appreciation of their material. So you need those two pieces. Like, I trust you as a person, and I trust your taste.
Right.
You know, so you need both of those things. It's kind of rare to have that relationship.
Did you find, could you take direction? Could you take a note from Jerry, or did that take?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, like, we're like so used to working alone.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I work alone, lady. And, you know, so you're used to working by yourself as a comedian. So having anybody else except somebody like him that I love and respect so much, I know it's coming from, I know he's not in it working with me for the money. There's no money. He loses money when he works. I'm not kidding. He's not in it for the ego, you know what I mean? Right. So he's only in it, you know, out of the love and the work. So anything he says is not coming from a place like, hey, I want to mess with you, know what I mean?
Sure.
And so it's always coming from a positive, healthy place. But he was even worried when we first started working together. He said, you know, I worry because a lot of times with friends, your friendship ends.
Right.
Because it's a really tough, you know, it's a tough
volatile,
thing doing a show together. But it worked out great. I mean, but, you know, it's definitely, it could have been.
You feel like it was a little bit of a roll of the dice to see it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're working, you know, it's personal stuff, you know.
Absolutely. We have a clip from Long Story Short that we'll
Oh,
show.
great.
This is a good one. This features your Ray Liotta impersonation, which I enjoy. So we'll take a look at Long Story Short, and then we'll talk a little more.
But it was a glorious time for Rome, you know. It was the beginning of the mob. They all had that, Ray Liotta swagger, you know. You see, Caesar couldn't have been more than 28 or 29 at the time, but he was already a legend. He started out doing hits for the legions. You see, hits never bothered Caesar. But what Caesar really liked to do was steal. He was the kind of guy that rooted for the lions in the gladiator fights. And hundreds of guys depended upon Caesar, and he got a piece of everything they made. It was tribute, just like in the old country. And all they got from Caesar was protection against other guys that were trying to rip them off. And that's all the Roman Empire was, the police department for guys that couldn't go to the other empires. You see, Caesar had it down to a system. He'd have the tribunes invade a province. Then when the consul came to Caesar, Caesar'd make him a partner. Now the guy's got Caesar for a partner. Any problems, he can come to Caesar. Slaves revolt, come to Caesar. Vandals invade, you come to Caesar. chariot drivers want to go on strike, you come to Caesar. But now the guy's got to pay Caesar every month, no matter what. Crops failed, fuck you, pay me. Plague of locusts, fuck you, pay me. God gets mad, kills the firstborn son in every family, fuck you, pay me. And then finally, when there was nothing left and they'd squeezed every last dime out, somebody lit a match and they burned Rome down for the insurance money.
I think that's terrific.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like it was almost the history of it in a way.
Yeah, no, but you're really sort of dancing on the head of a pin there because you're trying to get the Goodfellas homage just right, and you're trying to be, factually accurate.
Right.
You got
Right.
it all. I mean, are you literally in the process of preparing for a show like that? I mean, are you sitting down at the library and going through books and reviewing the history of it? Is it things that you just already remember from?
No, I mean mostly Google, Google and stuff. I mean, for that show. But for unconstitutional, I read like 4 constitutional books.
Right.
Worst, man. Yeah. But I mean, for that kind of stuff, we know the history of Rome, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's more like Googling that and then watching Goodfellas.
Right. So you're getting paid to do the things you
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, but one of the, if I remember it correctly, I mean, one of the sort of ideas of Long Story Short, I mean, you're tracking the history of civilization from culture to culture. You're talking about how sort of just tenuous the idea of civilization is, how it's always sort of on the precipice. Do you feel like you were ahead of your time there? You were a little too on the nose with that thesis?
Well, I mean, we always talk about that stuff too, about how everything is just how humanity never seems to like. I think it was Jerry's line when he said, "It's not after you, it's after me." How people are just. It's been like that since time began. Just that whole people looking out for themselves first, and just the how we can easily just turn.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry, I imagine you must regularly get offered opportunities to do other things on Broadway, direct, be in things. I mean, does the larger idea of Broadway appeal to you, or this was just a kind
The
of...
larger idea of Broadway, me?
Yeah. Being involved in it somehow, no?
Being involved in Broadway,
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Doing what? Singing, dancing, or? No. I like the brutality of stand-up and the simple, boiled down, it either lives or dies of a joke.
Right.
And that's why the only way that I could get involved in this, because it's based on that. If he was really trying to tell a story and it was just humorous, I wouldn't have any interest.
Right.
Jerry's going to be appearing in Same Time next year. It's a revival.
I mean, there was a time when I would have said the same thing, that, comedy belongs in a different place. But I feel like there's so much that's happening now. I was talking earlier to Colin about a show that Nick Kroll and John Mulaney are doing right now, Oh Hello.
Oh, hello.
They've really, I think there's the idea of what it can be has, to me, feels like it really has expanded, and that there's room for all different kinds of talents now. But to you, it's all about that kind of the connection of a club or a theater environment, and just delivering it to people that way.
Well, I think that's a great thing that's happened in comedy, but it's very niched like everything else, which is kind of the opposite of the culture that I grew up in. The culture of comedy I grew up in was, if you want a job, you got to be able to walk out in front of Frankie Valli's audience, who does not want to see you, and you've got 15 minutes to get them. And they don't like you, they don't want you, and they don't know you. That is the exact opposite. So that was our first bar that we tried to reach, was how can I get these people to laugh, who don't even want to see a comedian. So now you have a comedy has gotten to the point where you can really tailor what you want, and the audience will tailor themselves to what you do. It's the complete opposite formula. You know what I'm saying? It's like you do your thing, and that audience that likes that particular thing comes to find you.
Right.
And now you're a success very early on without learning to do that more difficult thing in my terms, which is make people laugh that don't even want to see you.
Do you, even in a masochistic way, do you miss that earlier aspect of it when you had to, really go out and, fight to maybe earn that audience's, respect?
Yeah, that was very exciting to be able to, when you accomplish that, you go out on the Tonight Show, and who is this total unknown person, that they don't get you, they don't know your humor, and then you have to get them. Yeah, that was thrilling, hugely thrilling.
So your show, The New York Story, which we've been talking about tonight,
Yes.
that was, at the same time that you were doing that, you also had that book, The Coloring Book. Now, was the show adapted from the book, or they were sort of companion projects?
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be, but then, like I said, he had brought this idea up for years before that, and then the coloring book, when I started writing it, I was like, this is horrible. Writing a book is the hardest thing in the world. I had to have, somebody come in who was, helping me, ghost writes, it was so hard. And then the only way I could write it was when I started writing it as stand-up. So I said, at least now I know I'm performing on stage that night. That's the only way I could get any writing done. Because writing a book, you're by yourself all the time, and you don't get that. I'm so used to hey, this is funny, and then give it to a crowd and get laughs.
Right.
That when you're, hey, this is funny, you're just sitting by yourself. It's tough, you know.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of really personal stuff in the book.
Yeah.
Things about your own experience, growing up, coming of age,
Sure.
places you got thrown out of, et cetera.
A lot of those in the book.
Yeah. But it was.
Thanks for not reading it, folks. I see.
I thought you were very giving of yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah. How do you decide, even in these two projects, a stand-up project and a book project, what goes into each, or how much of yourself to share, and these kinds of things?
Well, with the book is different, but with stand-up, our rule, which is, we talk about it almost repetitively. Like I said, I feel like it's almost to remind yourself. It's if it's not getting, like you said, if something's humorous, it's not right for stand-up. It has to get laughs. Or I feel like stand-up has to be funny. It sounds like an obvious thing, but, if people are doing, you have to get laughs first. Then whatever you want to say, that's great.
Right.
So, but it's not getting laughs, then you can put it somewhere else, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with the book, I was just, like I said, at that point, I was just I better finish this book. Then I finished the book, and I'm it was 280 pages or something. And then the book, I was like, well, it's a little short. I was like, are you kidding me? It almost killed me to do the book. And they tell me it's one of the shortest books they've ever published. You won't be seeing me here by McGraw Hill anymore, I tell you that.
Oh, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Jerry, but did you happen to read his book?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I find books, that's too long for
Right.
me.
If it was a literal coloring book, then.
I did pick it up, and I did read different parts of it. And I think that's how, New York Story started.
Yeah.
Really thinking, this could easily be shaped into that.
Yeah. There's an idea, in the show that you talk about sort of how out of place when you hear people in New York expressing themselves optimistically now.
Right.
How strange and out of place that feels, especially given the era that you grew up in and what you were sort of used to.
Sure.
You talk about negativity sort of making humorous characters.
Yeah.
Do you mind just expanding on that idea?
Well, just the fact that when everyone thinks of a character, when you think of a real character, what a character, it's never somebody who's positive, going, hey, I want, you know what I mean? It's always somebody's got a little bit of a shit out, you know what I mean?
Right.
And New York was always known for that. Even when you look at Bugs Bunny,
Right.
Bugs Bunny was a wisecrack New York accent. What's up, Doc? And it's that type of side of the mouth kind of personality that's just cynical. I feel like that was one of the things that's gone now,
Yeah.
Past.
Yeah. Does it feel? It feels strange even now when you talk about it in the special. Just somebody talking about how nice it is when the sun is out and what an odd thing to hear somebody express. It just doesn't feel like something that a New York person would say.
Yeah, in my elevator, it literally happened to me several times. How much are you loving this sun? I'm like, Jesus, not as much as you apparently. And then. People going, lacrosse equipment and elevator. It's just weird.
I mean, I think one of the greatest things about this show, and I love this show so much, the New York Story, is that he's the only person who has the comedic ability and kind of the background to capture this moment of New York, which is gone. So he was able to document it. You know, to me, this show's like a document of a lost city, you know.
Right.
So it's fantastic to me that, and nobody seems to care also that a lot of it is ethnic judgment
Right.
about different people. These people are good at this, bad at this, and these people like this, and these people like that.
Right.
And don't you find that interesting, David, that nobody gave a damn about that? It's this thing that we're not supposed to be doing. He does it for an hour.
Yeah.
and everybody likes it. I found that to be very interesting.
Nobody gave a damn until now.
I want to be careful about how I express this because I've thought about this, but I haven't said it out loud. And it's probably going to come out all wrong. But it's almost like a sort of gentle corrective to political correctness in a way. I mean, it's not saying you talk, for example, about the distinction between racism, which is institutional, and prejudice, which is personal.
Right.
Right. And not that obviously life without prejudice would be great, but a certain amount of it is certainly in a certain era of New York was just
Sure.
to be expected. It's just sort of how people operated.
Sure. I mean, it's almost like I said, people are tribal in a certain way, and so when New York, when people just bump up against each other over the years, you would have people that would say things like, that must be a prejudiced person, but they would seem closer in some way, or they would seem like they get along better than people that are being positive but from a distance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're speaking kind of generally. So it was just there was something more authentic about people's relationships in some way.
And I mean, the neighborhood you grew up in, I mean, it was
very mixed at the
yeah, exactly. I mean, it was very much a melting pot, but also people sort of keeping to their own clans, but intermingling in the same.
Yeah. I feel like by like high school, people started to separate, which was just the way it went. Everybody did, but before that, everybody was like very, very mixed.
Right. I mean, was that a hard moment to sort of when you get to the age and you start to see people kind of going their own way?
With their own groups, and you saw it. It was like, and you still have your friends like, hey, what's up? And just nod to each other. You're walking by with your two different groups down the hallway. What's up? But that's just, it was sad, but that was how it went. Yeah.
Right. Were you allowed to acknowledge that you were once friends with those other people?
Yeah, but it was it's high school still. Right. I'm sure it happens to all kids, like kids that were friends, and then one became a big, even if they're the same race, and one becomes a football star, the other kid's kind of a nerd, and they're still kind of friends from when they were little kids, but
Right. Were you still kind of aspiring intellectual then?
A nerd?
No.
Well, I like that better than nerd.
Yeah.
No, I was kind of. I mean, I was an intellect. I used to read all the time, but I thought of myself as kind of like as you know, in the book, I thought of myself as like one of those Irish hard drinking intellectual types, and I had the hard drinking part down. Because I used to read this book with The Ginger Man by J.P. Dunleavy, and I based my whole life on that.
Right.
Didn't work out well.
No.
It ended early.
Yeah. I'm sure you've encountered, both of you. I mean, people who have lived in New York for any amount of time, they say they miss the old New York, which to them is basically any period before other people showed up and somehow changed the character of the city. But I mean, both of you lived here at a time when it was pretty rugged. I mean, the taxi driver era of the city. I mean, are you ever genuinely nostalgic for that period, or is it a good thing that we've sort of moved beyond that?
This is one of his favorite things, and I love to poke him about this. Which is worse, the Disneyfication of Times Square or living your life at knife point? Which is really worse? And they're both, one is soul crushing and one is bloodletting. So, you got to pick your poison.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting thing. And I love the Fran Lebowitz line about people don't miss the way New York was. They miss when they were younger. That's where they're thinking. I thought that was a great observation. That's what you miss. You were young then.
Yeah.
But I will say I spent thousands of hours more time on 42nd Street back then than I do today.
You have a great line in this special. I'll get it all wrong. It's not my job to get these things right. But when you talk about
So says the paper.
Nobody's
right.
attacking
Yeah.
you. Speaking of a New York attitude, hey.
Yeah, but I'm gonna give you the sense of it, and hopefully you'll keep me on the right track. But the line about, hey, your mother works on 42nd Street,
Right,
and
right.
what that meant in 2 different eras.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I mean, she works for the Times. That's fine. What are you gonna do? So, back then, that was like a fighting word. So if somebody
Yeah.
said that about your mother, you fight right there. Even Canal Street, for some reason. I don't even think there were hookers back then, but your mother's Canal Street. Yeah.
Jerry, I mean, forgive me for, invoking the old sitcom, but, just in the period that you were making it, you're mostly living in LA. Was it in any way difficult to, try to reach back and remember the character of the city or?
It was a little, but luckily it was mostly New Yorkers writing the show, and we wrote it from our impression of it. And some people were writing at the time that the show kind of changed people's perception of the city. As the city was changing, we made it seem like this fun, frolicky kind of place, Whereas the Taxi Driver was the 70s image, we changed the image of it.
Absolutely. No, I think, I mean, when people sort of think of, just a sort of a quick, snapshot of it, that is, they probably think of the show before the specific experience of it. But, I mean, you tapped into also, I mean, we talked about with Colin, the idea of, you get characters from negativity. And that seems, in one way or another, that also seems to be the ethos of your show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Inexplicable malevolence was our favorite thing. There's no reason. There was never a reason I didn't like Newman. There was no reason. We just think it's better to hate this guy.
Now, you've continued to have a TV presence with your digital series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, that recently finished its 8th season. So we have a clip that we're going to show now. This is actually
nice. Okay.
So we'll take a look at that.
We're just gonna run out for a quick coffee. We'll be right back.
I'm sorry, that's not possible.
And I do this little show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
You're a comedian with the president going nowhere. Back it up.
Yes, sir. Do you ever think about every person you talk to is putting on an act, a total show?
It's a problem.
Don't you think every American child is a president fan? You grow up loving the president.
I do really well with the 0 to 8 demographic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they love me. Partly because I think my ears are big, and so I look a little like a cartoon character.
Right.
And then little kids love saying my name.
Right. That's
But it's
funny.
all one big name. It's Barack Obama.
It is one of those names that you could compress into one word.
Into one word.
Yeah, it's good.
Barack Obama. It's like a Nickelodeon thing.
Well, anything Orama is fun.
This is called the Beast. It's a caddy, basically on a tank frame.
Oh my God.
Yeah, see? So I could call a nuclear submarine right here from this. How about you don't have that in
I
your
don't
car?
have that.
Yeah, it's a cool feature. Plus seat warmers. So between the nuclear
everybody's
submarine
got
thing
that.
and the
Yeah.
oh, is that right? That's standard.
That's pretty standard everywhere now, yeah. This I
I
like though.
actually-
I'm gonna get that.
You can't have that.
What is it that you really want to do that they don't let you do?
I would love to just be taking a walk, and then I run into you. You're sitting on a bench, right?
Now
And suddenly I say, "Hey, Jerry, how you doing?" And you say, "I'm doing pretty good. What are you doing?" "Oh, nothing. It's a Saturday morning."
Right.
That moment when you lost your anonymity. Mm-hmm. And anonymity is not something you think about as being valuable.
With all due respect,
Yeah.
I remember very well not being famous.
You think it was okay?
It wasn't that great.
Yeah.
It was.
You think being famous is better? Yes.
Yeah.
So here's a highly original question, but how did that particular booking come about?
My producer that produces Comedians in Cars also produces the debates for the election. So she knew a lot of the people in the White House staff, and they were in communication, and they liked our show, and he liked to do shows like that looked like fun, and we had met one time, and they just kind of talked about it, and it happened. It was really exciting.
Right, right. I mean, you from your previous encounter with the president to this experience, I mean, you found him. It seems like just a pretty he's a good laugher. He likes to. He kind of easily tells jokes. Were you? I mean, you find him genuinely funny, a good joke.
Oh yeah. If I didn't see that he had the ability in those correspondence dinner monologues. I wouldn't try and make the average politician funny. I would not try and do that.
Right.
I'm not actually good around people. If someone's not funny, I tend to just shut down. Some comedians can just spritz and they're funny and they get people going, but I have to be around somebody funny to feel funny.
All right. Well, my follow-up question is going to be terrible, but has there been any discussion about getting the president-elect on the show?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one thing that people may not know about comedians in cars, I mean, you've been kind enough to me to let me see you actually doing the post-production on the show, and it's just really a couple of people. It's like yourself, your editor, a couple producers, that's it. And, you know, I was really, you know, just kind of stunned by that. I mean, is that part of the appeal for you of just the compactness of it?
Yes.
And just you and your idea and the execution of it?
Yeah, this is one of the really cool things about Netflix, I think, to give them a plug, which they deserve, is that they seem to have grasped this basic idea of how to make shows with creative people that the corporate world has never fully understood, which is you can't help these people. Find someone you like, give them the money, and just hope for the best. You can improve their odds with your notes and your thoughts and we were looking for this, we think the public likes that. Nobody knows what works. That's the truth.
Right.
It's all just shooting arrows at the sun. So, but they have created this platform now where they can finance so many artists, and then the public becomes the note session with the product out there, and that's the only real way to decide. I mean, that's how comedians work. We decide, we write the jokes, but the public picks them. And then we do the ones they laughed at.
Right. With Colin's special, I mean, was this something where you knew you already had, you know, Netflix involved, or do you make it on a flyer and you hope that they'll go for it?
No, they were involved from the beginning.
Right, and they gave you basically autonomy to kind of do it.
Yeah, they were terrific. They support you. You know, you cannot help people in creativity. You just can't.
You helped Colin though. You gave him.
Yeah, no, but I mean that interface of network executives and writers and comedians and artists, them trying to work together to make something better, that doesn't work.
Now, and Colin, you also have a digital series of your own called Cop Show. And that's
Few, but they're mighty.
yeah. They're dedicated. So we have a clip of this as well, which we'll take a look at. And the premise of the show, if I don't explain it correctly, you'll correct me. But this is sort of a satirical, behind-the-scenes look at the making of a TV crime drama.
Right.
Okay. So here's a scene from Cop Show.
Today's episode it's about a female hipster drug gang. Kind of like the show Girls, only if they were drug dealing. And we're not doing it to exploit the popularity of the show Girls. This is, like I said, these are real cases that I've gotten information are occurring. What do we got?
Dolores Kensington. She's the leader of a hipster drug ring.
Let me get my hands on her. I will beat a confession out of her.
Whoa, where's the sisterhood, sister? Wait, didn't I see you at a hipster-type concert? Yeah, at the Barclays Center, a Maroon 5 concert.
You are not my sister. You are a disgrace to all women. Do you know that 43% of all women in a survey taken have said that they have gotten their drugs from other women?
Leave her alone. She just works for the guy. Amy's on fire right now. Amy's all over the place.
Amy seems very busy these days. How did you get her to come in to do the episode?
I pepper the sister with texts until basically they throw up their hands and go, let's do it. Dolores Kensington, can I get you a drink?
Yes, I would like an artisanal cookie and a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Can I tell you something? I find you very attractive and handsome. You're the type of guy who could get a girl like me to quit dealing drugs. Why would I ever say that? That's not how people talk.
She feels it. Put yourself in her position. She's her whole life surrounded by these nerdy hipsters, and then she comes face to face with this. Amy knows this is quality, and one thing about Amy's about career, and she knows that being on a show like this is good for her career, because people see her as the funny girl. She comes on a show like this, and then she's like, oh, I get to really act. This is good. I feel like there's a good tension. I want us to be recurring. This could be like I want to have you come back.
No, don't do that. I'm booked. I have a this year's things are.
I'll write it. It'll be quick. I'll write it in. In the dialogue.
You
no
don't
worries.
need to do that. Don't do that.
Little Amy.
So Jerry was talking earlier just about the, the satisfaction of a digital series and the autonomy that comes with it. I mean, is that part of what is satisfying for you about this series?
Oh yeah, exactly. Because it's like you get to be there's nothing in between. Going look, it's like, and that's why that's why network meetings go so well all the time when comedians are in them, because we're like, you don't understand. We do focus groups every night.
Yeah.
All over the country, and they're like, I don't know if people in Iowa get that. It's like, we were in Iowa last week. They get it.
Of all the different things that you could have done with a digital show, I assume you just kind of have, freedom in the palette to do whatever. What inspired this particular idea?
The fact that I was never on Law and Order, and I was so mad that they never asked me to be on Law and Order. Right. And then when I was passing Law and Order steps, and that's how I thought of it. But yeah, it was just all resentment that I was never on Law and Order.
Right. Do you have any sense of if the people who make Law and Order are aware of the show? Have they given you any fan notes?
Since then, and I swear to God, there was one. They must have seen it, and they literally sent me a part, and it was like a part. It was like a guy. He's a director, but he's also like a semi director rapist. Like he knocks girls out, rapes them. No. It was a good part. It was a juicy part. But the way he does it, he has some sucker that in the first scene, who was on the first 2 pages, then he goes, okay, I'll take it from here. Right. They offered me the 2-line part of the sucker.
You wanted to be the director?
Yeah, Dave. Apparently you in the crowd feel I should have took the 2 lines, but I think of myself as bigger than that. I'm sorry, folks.
No, I appreciate the size of the role. It just seems like the character seems unsavory.
Well, I'm not saying I would have loved the character. I'm just saying, I guess the story's never really going to work because of the nature of the character. But, but it's just the size of the role was a slap in the face of a trained professional such as myself.
I've really enjoyed. I mean, you've had a really flourishing and fascinating acting career in the last couple of years. I mean, you've had you had the role on Girls. I thought you were terrific in Trainwreck. That was a wonderful performance.
Oh, now you applaud. Was he unconstitutional? No, go ahead.
I mean, do you have to be, in this profession, do you have to be kind of binary about, okay, I'm going to pursue the acting or I'm going to pursue the stand-up, or is there a way to do it all?
Another thing we talk about all the time is, stand-up, like acting is fine, but stand-up, it takes your whole thing. Yeah. Trying to write, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's a whole career, but I was talking about this with a friend today, because is stand-up so popular now that if you're a young comedian and people like you and you're building a following, maybe you don't have to do anything else, but I think you always do. You always have to kind of repurpose or show that you have another ability. It just, I don't know, it does something to the audience. They
keep your name out there.
Yeah. See, that's the Jewish thing.
So we have a couple of minutes left, and I've been given some questions that I believe came to us via Facebook Live. So these are audience submitted
Let me
questions.
say ahead of the time, I'm not going to be insulted that they're all going to be questions for Jerry. Go on.
These are open ended. They could be for
Yeah, right.
both, either of you. So, looking back at the beginning of Seinfeld.
David, did you do that?
Yes.
That was good.
Yeah, that was good.
The question is, what aspects of the lost New York culture do you generally mourn, and which do you think are better left in the past?
Well, I think we kind of covered that. The characters are lost, but the poo-poo scoop law was good.
Right.
It really is. It really is about that the city became a destination of, kind of a paradise. I live in Manhattan, don't you remember in the summer, people say, yeah, we live in the city. They would almost say it like, unfortunately, it's like there's nothing we can do, we can't get out.
I'll tell you what I miss. What Park Slope used to, what I've noticed in Park Slope, which I'm sure a lot of neighbors now, nobody's out. Like in the old days, the streets were filled with people sitting on the stoop, and nobody's out anymore. Streets you walk over the block, middle of the afternoon, nobody's out.
Yeah. So this is a question specifically for Colin, and it's I think a better expression of something I tried to ask you earlier, which is, how did you manage to touch on so many cultural stereotypes, but with such care?
I don't know. I mean, just like, I'm just telling, like, people I knew and what everybody probably kind of, I don't know. It's hard to say, but it was just,
Well, the real answer is he makes it funny. If it's not
funny,
funny
right.
as it is, he doesn't get away with it.
Right.
Comedy always fixes all the problems.
Right. But some people can be funny, but also provocative a little bit, and not to say that you don't have an edge to you, but there's I dare anybody to watch this and come away offended. There are people. Some people don't take the same approach. Some people, they don't care. I think you seem to care.
Yeah, I care about people, sure. I don't have hate for any of the groups I'm talking about. Underneath,
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm not like, hey, I'm going to sneak this one by people.
Right.
I'd say whatever I want, but it's not,
There's this little thing of, I want to say this and I want to be funny. And that little balance.
Right.
If it's 1 inch above, I really want to say this, and it's not that funny, the audience they will recoil instantly. It's like you're preaching, or you're trying to make some stupid point.
Right.
And they but if it's always, this is really funny, and it says something, then you're okay.
Yeah, which is fine if you're a preacher. But if you're advertised as a comedian,
Right.
you have to be sure you're getting laughs at what you're saying.
Right. Right. So one final question: do you think there is a generation gap in comedy?
Whoa.
I don't.
No.
What a note to end on. Whew.
I don't know. I feel like all the young comics or anything, they're such comedy, so like they grew up on stand-up in a way, so they're like, they know comedy in a way, it's scary. They're like, oh yeah, well you did that bit in 1995, and I was like, what the? Like they know it in a great way. And so I feel like this funny is funny. It's still, I feel like it's still the same way,
I
Just
don't know.
go along with it. I can tell just by the it's gonna be trouble.
Right.
Well.
I want comedians to always push themselves to be bigger than the niche that they started with. When I started, all my bits were about cold cereal and Little Green Army Men. And if you weren't born in like an 8-month range of me, you didn't get it. And then you work to get broader and broader without being generic or pandering. And to me, that is the mission. Instead of playing to your crowd, this is to me the generation gap of my old school and young people today. That's get bigger. Don't just play to the people that get you. Play to the people that don't get you, and you'll get better.
Right.
And the act gets better, and everything, you know, that's where you should try to go. So that's a little gap that I see that in the newer comedy that I don't love that much.
That was mostly a good aspirational
Yeah,
note to conclude on. I think it was. Yeah, everybody should aim a little higher. Everybody be ambitious. Yeah. Well, Jerry Seinfeld, Colin Quinn, thank you so much for sitting
Thanks,
down.
Dave.
Thank you,
Such a
David.
pleasure.
Thank you, Dave.